This video of me talking about a board game. Today I'm going to be talking about, this is part of the Final Girl series, and this is the series review. I have not watched every single video because I literally just got done recording one of them, and also I haven't had the time to go through the other ones. I've kind of watched them. I haven't watched the full thing, but this is me just talking about my feelings and summary on Hans. We have Hans from the Lore and Scenario book. There's Hans right there. There's a core box. All the fun stuff. And this is talking about my feelings and stuff about the experience. So as an experience overall, did I enjoy myself is the key question. The answer is yes, but not for the reasons that the developers might have wanted. I enjoyed my experience from the perspective of how can I think about this game at a deeper level and maybe try to find the mechanics that I don't like and adjust it to where I can find more joy personally. So my particular approach to this game was not I'm going to try to win this game, I'm going to try to beat this game, I'm going to try to enjoy this, or alternatively, I'm here to enjoy the atmosphere, I'm trying to see the stories telling, blah. I took the approach for this game as a person who is playing a game that I know that I'm not a big fan of, mechanically speaking, but I like a lot of other things about it. As in, I like the cool stories it can tell, I like the situations that it can bring you about, I like the moments of crisis that make sense, to where you have a dilemma, to where it's like, do I do this or do I do this? There are times in this game to where those dilemmas stand out pretty well. But much in the same way as some other games, there's some really big booms and some really big busts in this game. And a lot of the busts all boil down to one particular issue, which to me is just based on dice. So the scenario part, the story part, that's a really cool distraction. That's a really cool thing to cover up the awfulness, in my opinion, of sometimes how the dice can be. And it does force you to rethink about how you play the game with some of the scenarios, because they give you special conditions like, hey, you can only do this, or you must do this before you can do that. So the game makes you kind of play around with some of the mechanics a lot, and that I do appreciate the game for, because I want you to explore more of the game instead of just sit there and play it. Do I agree with with some of the developers and designers that the lore book is designed to be designed to be much harder than the normal game? No, I disagree. I think that I would argue the opposite. I would argue that the lore book makes the game more balanced than the base game, or than the game itself. What I mean by that is that, for those who don't know, in Final Girl is a very modular system to where you have different boxes and different killers. So you can take the killer here, which is a poltergeist, which is on the inside of this box, which I like this whole cool box mechanic. There's a killer there, there's a whole sheet. You can take this killer and you can go to another location and fight them. And when I say location, I'm referring to, like, here's Creech Manor. I can go to Creech Manor and I can fight Poltergeist on Creech Manor, which is the Poltergeist's home location. Or I can take Hans, who we have down here, and fight Hans on Creech Manor. I can kind of mix and match. I can kind of mix and match what I'm doing, and that whole system is really, really fun. Just to kind of think about the possibilities that you have, like think about the combinations, and it's really cool and really neat. And I like that idea. I kind of hope that more games will adopt that in the future, because it gives you a lot of value. It gives a value proposition to the players, to where it's like, not only you're buying one game, but if you buy another one, you're buying, have 3 games or 4 games or 5 games, and it kind of increases exponentially. However, there is a problem. There is a problem here, to where there's a very strong balance issue. So that balance issue is a lot more thought out and addressed, in my opinion, through the lore and scenario. So, like I said, the lore and scenario experience, the main question is, did I enjoy my experience with the lore and scenario books? Yes, mostly because I enjoyed the theory crafting part of how would I adjust this game to make it more enjoyable for myself, but also because it really kind of took all these mechanics and made them shine, as in you have situations where well, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who doesn't want to be spoiled. If you're watching this video and you don't want to be spoiled, then I'll try my hardest to not spoil my playthroughs or what's in the lore and scenario book. But I'll just say that the scenario book does a cool job of kind of taking some mechanics, letting you play with them, letting you kind of have a little bit of a sandbox to kind of explore, and then giving you certain restrictions and giving you certain challenges. That's fun. That's a really cool approach to using and playing with this kind of system. Is kind of having a challenge of the week. Can you win versus this, or how long can you survive versus that, or how many victims can you rescue because of with this scenario? That would be a cool approach. That would be a cool thing to do with this game, especially in its current iteration, in its current form. But that said, in an attempt to try to play this game in a sense of I'm going to play it to win, you're gonna have an awful time. This game is really, 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 really based on statistics. To the point to where there are some scenarios in the book to where it's I don't think I'm designed to win this. I think it's nearly impossible for me to win this based on how it's currently set up. The stats are just not in your favor. And that is something that's kind of echoed throughout all 5 scenarios with Hans, and that's something that's really holding the game back. So if that can be addressed, that'll be fun, that'll be fine, that can make this a lot more enjoyable, a lot more fun for hopefully more people. And I think I was mentioning a note before about some of the designers and developers said, well, it's not always fair. Oh, okay, maybe I didn't say the recording, but I'll say it now at least. Is that a comment directly to the designers is like, the argument that, you know, sometimes in horror movies things are unfair. Sometimes the killer gets a burst of energy and they go across the board and they smack in the face and they take out the victim or the final girl. And it's like, yeah, that's cool for horror movies, but I'm playing a board game. Like what I mean by that is that if I'm playing a 0-player board game, go for it. If I'm playing a 1-player board game, let me actually play. I feel like there's a lot of times to where the game will take the controller from the player and just like say, no, you're gonna see this. Hey, look, watch this. Hey, look this happen. Hey, watch this happen. Hey, look, here's a cool thing. Watch this happen. It's like, okay, that's cool game, but can I actually play the game? And that's me speaking from a perspective of somebody who's played 20 plus games of Final Girl already, which I'm not gonna say that makes me an expert in anything by any stretch of imagination, but it definitely makes it to where I've seen some really awful combinations of cards. I've seen some really like cool combinations of things that happen. I had a situation in a different game to where because of an item I had, I was able to very easily trounce the killer. It was mainly because of the item. The item was so good that I was like, okay, I just use this item and I can do this thing, and that lets me do this thing, and then the killer, I don't think it was Hans, it was whoever I was fighting, was suddenly no longer a problem. And the game became not necessarily a cakewalk, but it became much more enjoyable for me because I feel like I was building up. I felt like a final girl. I felt like I was gonna take out the killer and all this other stuff. There's also another game where I was doing so well, it was comical. It was comical how good I was doing. And then all of a sudden, on my turn, I made a bad call. As in, instead of doing this, I did that. And because I did that there was a consequence with that, which means that I couldn't do this. And this is me being very vague with my words and terminology, but long story short, because I didn't do this when I had the opportunity to do this, then all of a sudden the killer caught up and then exceeded, and then all of a sudden my great game, my cakewalk of a game became the worst, most nightmarish game because I made that one really bad decision. So those kind of situations can pop up, and those kind of situations do happen. I wouldn't necessarily say more often than not, but here's the thing. Here's the thing with this game. If I go into this book here, or go into this box here, I have a stat sheet that I made for this game, counting the statistics for your different various dice rolls. And it even has some modifications in here that kind of live in the box, but we'll ignore those for a second. The statistics for you rolling certain things in this game dictate how well you're going to do. So I guess some people might try to make the argument that that's kind of like doing a skill check in D&D. It's like, yes, but doing a skill check in D&D, you have proficiencies, so you start from a level of non-zero. Whereas in this game, you always start from a level of 0, and you're always trying to roll success. So instead of having a proficiency stack, or instead of having a skill stack, you actually just start with nothing. And you try to go from nothing to actually something, and then by the time you get to something, you may or may not achieve what you're trying to achieve, or you may just flat out fall apart. And that kind of thing hinders a scenario-based play like this, because if I'm going to be playing a continuous set of scenarios, why is it that I can't carry over some things? I mean, yeah, in this Han scenario, it's not much of a spoiler, but in the Han scenario, you do carry over certain things from one game to the next. And that thing that you carry over is very valuable. It's very useful, but it's very conditional. Sometimes you want to use it, sometimes you really don't want to use it. Sometimes you want to keep it going for a while, sometimes you really want to get it off the board as soon as you can. So that little bit of carryover is not nearly enough. Now, the reason why I mentioned the whole proficiency and stats thing is because this is our stats chart here. If we look at successes and partial successes, this game really wants you to make as many dice rolls as possible, and then based on the dice roll, the game will try to tell a story. And that's cool. Once again, I'm happy for the game, and I'm gonna let you finish, but I really need the game to kind of take a step back and let me actually play the game. As in, I've purchased these cards for this specific reason. I've timed it this way for a specific reason. I'm gonna play this card. I understand that, you know, bad things happen and stuff happens, but stuff keeps happening in the situation to where not only did my card that I really needed to go off not go off, but there's a random card that showed up with a killer, did this really awful thing, and there's another thing that over here that just punched me in the face, and then that punched me in the face, and then over here I got to do this, and all of a sudden the plan crumbles apart, and now I'm in a perilous situation, towards less of a tactical situation, more of a, no, this is a foobar situation. This is a flipped up beyond all relief situation, to where I can't even do anything if I wanted to. So all that goes an extremely long way to say that my playthrough of the scenario highlighted in probably much more bolder text a lot of my problems with this particular system of a game as designed. I have two mods, three if you count this, the stat sheet, two mods that really help kind of shore up some of the randomness and kind of mitigate a little bit of the randomness, but I don't think that this game gives you enough tools to be able to mitigate random. To the point to where throughout these scenarios, there's some situations to where it gives you a benefit. And one of those benefits carries with you from one scenario to the next, for Hans specifically. And without that particular benefit, this becomes an unfeasible situation to where it's like, this is so difficult, why am I playing this? So even the game itself in the lore book, which is why I said before, the balance is a little bit more thought about and a little bit more considered. Even the lore book and scenario book takes a moment to actually kind of try to balance the game much more than what a normal game is balanced. Because on a normal game, everything is random. You got random events, you got random tarot cards, you got random killer movement, you got random starting game state, you got a whole bunch of random, and then also on top of that, you got to roll dice. So it's like 5 or 6 different sources of random. To where in the scenario book, you know what cards are likely in the killer's tarot deck. You know what event you're starting with. You know what special conditions are going to come up. You know all these things. You know what items might be in the decks across all the decks. Because sometimes the lore book will tell you to put certain items in the item deck. So you have a lot of known information that's much more refreshing when you're playing Final Girl, because you can say, okay, I know that there's 3 of these particular cards in the item deck. So I know if I search for the item deck, there's 12 cards total. There's a good chance I'm going to find one of those items. Or I know that there's 2 of these cards in the killer's tarot deck. So I know that I can, if I see the first one, then the second one's somewhere in there. So I need to prepare for it, I need to be ready. And that is much more fun than playing the normal game where you take the killer's 16 cards and you shuffle it with the location's 8 cards, I think, and then you shuffle those together and then take out random 10. And sometimes those events, sometimes those tarot cards, sometimes those cards can synergize so well that it's like, man, I wish the designers would have maybe considered this particular situation. But that's enough for me complaining about that. The primary thing I'm saying, though, is that my playthrough enjoyment comes from me constantly thinking about, okay, what is the mechanic here? What is it trying to do? Is it achieving its goal? And if it's not achieving its goal, in my personal opinion, how would I modify the game for myself to where I can enjoy it more? Do I think others should be deterred away from playing the scenario book? No, I think the scenario book is the best way to play this game. That said, the scenario book is the best way to play this game, which implies that there's something fundamentally not great about the system. Camp Happy Trails as a location and Hans as a killer, those two things by themselves with all their random together, I feel like Camp Happy Trails as a location and Hans together, like those things are fun. Those things are great by themselves, even on the random. Yes, you got some really nasty combinations that can pop up. Yes, you got some really unfortunate situations that can pop up. But with Camp Happy Trails, which is this location plus Hans, Camp Happy Trails as a location is skewed a little bit towards good. So that means that you have a little bit of breathing room from the location. Whereas other locations, specifically the Sacred Groves, which I'll give a shout out here, Sacred Groves is very much not skewed towards the player. It's very much skewed towards evil, meaning that it will do a lot of things to make you have the worst possible time. Especially if you're gonna randomize the event deck, especially if you're gonna randomize the items and all the other stuff. So that goes a long way to say that Camp Happy Trails plus the core box as a preposition, I'd recommend that. Camp Happy Trails Camp Happy Trails plus the core box plus Maple Lane. Those 3 things I think will give you a lot of value. But unfortunately, if you have just those 3 things, you can't really play all of the scenario book, which is a shame. Because like I feel like the scenario book does the best job of showing that, hey, here's the designers and the creators of the game giving patch notes. Basically saying, okay, we think that this might be balanced, this might tell a cool story, and also this will be kind of a way the player can play the game. And I feel like those things shine really strongly with the scenario book. But then again, should the scenario book be the thing that you would play with? I would recommend it. The designers and developers say that this is the harder way to play the game. I would respectfully disagree, adamantly disagree. But all that goes a long way to say that my playthrough for the Hans scenario through the lore and scenario book has been fun overall, because I get to sit down and kind of think about and kind of dissect the game a lot and think about, hey, what's the intention here? What's that there? And put me in a lot of scenarios and situations, made me think about the game differently, which is cool, and I appreciate that. So I would recommend playing through the lore and scenario, but unfortunately, you need to have all the other stuff to play through. So that's kind of a bummer. But yeah, take that how you will. So I'm going to go ahead and end this particular scenario review with Hans. I'm going to end it here. Oh, right, I forgot to talk about Hans. Hans as a killer is very fun, but also very mechanical towards the end. As in, once Hans runs out of tarot cards, he becomes very predictable, but he's fast enough to be scarily predictable. So it's to the point to where, you know, on the one hand, yes, this is kind of boring. This is a slugfest between the final girl and the killer, which in this case Hans. But then on the other hand, that kind of expected pathing is very much a breath of fresh air when you're playing a game that has so many different random variables in so many different places. So I do appreciate that, but also do think that if you just get Camp Happy Trails and play it by itself, it does get boring. I will concede that particular point, which is why I said if you're considering picking up this game and you want to just get the bare minimum you need to play it, I would say the core box plus Camp Happy Trail, and then the core box plus Camp Happy Trail plus Maple Lane if you want to try a little bit more of it. Everything else, I mean, Creech Manor is fun. Carnival Blood is debatable. Sacred Groves is a yikes for me, dog. But take that how you will. So Lauren's scenario book for Hans was fun. I got to play against Hans. I got to see Hans in a lot of different forms, a lot of different fashions, and that was cool. That was neat. And I'm going to move on to the Poltergeist. So see how the Poltergeist goes. Also, this sheet here is want to make sure I at least talk about it a little bit more. This sheet here goes over percentages for your chances of rolling, how many dice you're rolling, and then what you're rolling. So the stars are 5s and 6s, and the moons are 3s and 4s. So 3s and 4s in this game are partial successes. 5s and 6s are full successes. So there's a 44% chance if you roll 2 dice that you'll get a combination of 2 stars or 2 partials or a star and a partial. So that's a 44% chance. On the flip side, if you want to count stars as full successes as your only counter, when you roll 2 dice, there's 11% chance you get a double success. And you spend a lot of time at this game rolling 2 dice. I think that one very small tweak that this game can make to kind of make this more justified, in my personal opinion, is to simply increase the dice that you roll from 2 to 3. There's a way for you as a player to do it, and that's by making sure that your horror track is managed. So if I go back into the box here and look at this little track here, and that's simply to look at the horror track, which is here. And if you get yourself in this green area, you get to roll 3 dice. So I would make the strong argument, the very strong argument, that for the number of random variables in this game, if this is all shifted over one, maybe shift it over to where you roll 3 dice here, and then you roll 3 dice here, and you get +1 free reroll. Like maybe make it like that, but keep everything else as it is. So 3 dice here, 3 dice +1 reroll, and then 1 die when you're in the red. So that way you really don't want to fall off the cliff and get in the red, because you're in really dire straits at that point. That will make the game feel a little bit better, because now you're looking at more of a balanced situation, in my opinion, to where your chance of rolling stars is a 25% chance or 26% chance, which is much better than previous. Because 11% is not that great. 26% chance is pretty much a lot better. And you can actually have a little bit more of a consistent experience when you have 26% chance of getting what you want. And then on the flip side of that, you got a 96% chance of getting at least 1 star or 1 partial success, which means you really have to think about your resources a lot harder in that situation. Whereas here, 89%, it's not that big of a jump. It's like a 7% jump, but it does change how you feel, how you might approach a game overall. So that goes an extremely long way to say that, yeah, I think that there's some mechanical things that were kind of put to the front that I had already had suspicions about and had time to sit down and think about. But those things kind of come to the forefront when the game is considered for balance, in my opinion, with the scenarios. So that made it a little bit more enjoyable, because I kind of got to take a step back and think about how the devs think of this game, how the designers think of this game. But that's it. Stat sheet is there. It exists. Final Girl through Hans, made it, survived, or didn't survive. I don't know. Don't want to spoil it for y'all. But yeah. So thank you all very much for watching this video. That's going to be it for me. And hope you all enjoyed it. And as always, I will see y'all whenever.